Hey everyone, it has been a year since I did my listening room tour, and gosh, a lot has changed. Now, a year ago, I sent you on my $200,000 listening room tour, and a lot of you have watched and liked and subscribed because of that video. Well, over the last 12 months, and actually I think it's closer to 14, a lot has changed. The total value of this room now, going by the median price on Discogs, plus the cost of the hardware behind me that I'm about to show you, is now valued at an estimated $300,000. This is hard for me to even believe, to be honest with you. I mean, you can buy a house with that money, and what I'm doing with all of this in one room, I have no freaking idea. But I am going to bring you behind the scenes today. I'm going to walk around the room, and I'm going to show you everything. So I hope you really enjoy this video, and if you love vinyl, if you love hi-fi, especially 2-channel and analog, you're at the right channel, and I really hope that you grab a cup of joe and enjoy the tour. This one's for you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for taking this tour with me. I'm excited to show you my room. I'm giving you a view that maybe you're not familiar with. And what we'll do today is I'm going to start from one side of the room. We're going to kind of walk around. I'll show you my record collection. And then we'll go over some of the hardware and equipment that I use in this space. And then for those that are interested in what I do from creating YouTube videos, I'll just kind of walk you through my setup over here. And then we'll finish out with a couple other little things that are in the room. So as we begin, it actually starts outside of my office. So this is a shelf of records that I have just before you walk into my office. And this is filled with a couple things. So that top 3 cubes that you see over here are miscellaneous things that are less played. Let me come up the stairs so I can show you here. So here we have some records from Romania and the rest of the world. My wife is Romanian, so we tend to collect a lot of music from Romania. Most of these records come donated from her family, from villages. A lot of stuff is no longer in print. You can't find it anymore. And even if you can, the shape of them are not so great. So it's kind of cool. Then we have some non-music stuff here. This is where you're going to find some of your tools. I got some Wally tool stuff here. You got your test pressings, your hi-fi record, calibration records, but then you also have things like comedy, etc., that are just spoken word. Christmas and holiday take over this cube, and then we get into some classical music, and then it's a little bit of a placeholder because the rest of these records are records that are not cataloged yet in Discogs, and these are from recent acquisitions. So these are collections that I purchased, and I wanted to just quickly throw on a shelf. So as I get an opportunity, I can just grab a handful of these records and put them into Discogs, see if they have any value, or figure out what I want to do with them, whether that's to donate them or sell them off if I already have a similar or better pressing. So that's really it. And then these white boxes over here that you see, these are all 45s. So that container up above and those 3 white boxes are all 45s. And to me, out of everything you see here, that's what I'm most excited about, because I think people overlook 45s, and there's some really big gems out there that, quite frankly, I think get overlooked when people are record shopping. Up above, my wife and I were big nautical fans. We actually met and fell in love at sea. So we have a little bit of a dedication shrine to that. And then as we travel, I tend to fly a lot of Delta. My wife and I, we fly a lot of Delta. We collect a little playing card. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you board a Delta, you can ask them for a trading card, and you can go up to the pilot to collect them, and they'll give you a card that's specific to that airplane. And what's cool about that is it has a bunch of information about the plane on the back of the card. It also is for that specific plane, and then every year they come out with new designs of the cards. So even though if you flew that 757 this year or next year when you go, you have a new card. Okay, let's go over to the room now. You can see, as I said, the room is right next door. And this is where I walk into every day. This is how I spend my entire day. And it starts over here. I have these cat-like artworks. First off, I'm a big cat lover. I love dogs too, but I travel a lot, so my preferred domesticated animal is a cat. And when I saw some of these artworks of blending my passion in with one of my favorite animals, I had to put some of these, you know, frames or pictures or whatever you want to call them around the room. So for some, yeah, maybe that's not the best thing for you to have in your room. Maybe you're not a cat lover, but I really like it. I like the fact that it's this black cat, and you'll see a couple of those. I'm going to highlight my floor real quick because I think every record room should have something to diffuse the smell. That's an essential accessory right there, guys. The Airwick, air freshener is huge. And my records actually start over here. This is not really seen very often in my videos. Occasionally you'll see it in a backdrop. But this is my wall of Latin, blues, jazz, right? So this is what I got going on here. And you're probably noticing some room acoustic treatment. I'll talk about that a little bit, but let me get through some of these records real quick. So starting over here, what you have is blues music, and you'll see I have these big dividers that kind of tell you what category it is. Then anybody that I have more than 5 records of, I put a dedicated binder. And this is a little bit different than the rest of the collection because I don't have as many blues and Latino records as I do other things. So I'll break down how I organize a little bit further on. But it goes blues, and then this is all Latino music. And then we have reggae, and I got that broken down to like classic reggae, modern reggae, regular traditional reggae. So this is where you're going to find all your, Bunny Wailer, your Bob Marley, your Upsetters. Like this is where you're going to find all those great records. I'll try to capture some of those spines for you. And it gets into a little bit of calypso, etc. And then we go into jazz, and I start out with classic jazz. You got your Coltrane's in here, your Miles Davis, and then we're going to go into vocal jazz down below here. And what you'll notice is that each one of these cubes, what I've done is I labeled the outside of the cube. So from an eye view, I can easily tell, or anybody can easily tell what categories that cube has. So we get into then just regular old jazz, and that's going to take us all the way down to the floor. Right, so it's all my jazz. Now, one thing that I will say is I am not one that has a whole separate section of all my, certain brands, blue notes, or I don't break out like my super collectible records into one category where here's all my, $500 records, right? Everything's blended in here. Inside of here, you're going to have like the Kenny Burrell ERC pressing next to probably a $20 GZ cut of an album, right? So I don't break that out. I keep it very true to the artist. And I like that a little bit. And I think people who come over to look at records also like that, because you never know what you're going to find, right? Otherwise, you'll just come over and you'll look at the audiophile section and you're only going to pick records from that. I think this forces you to look for records, find things, go through your collection a little bit more when you're blending that together. And I don't have a lot of folks that come and pull records off my wall. So I kind of control all of this myself. So, a lot of times people break those records out, like they'll break their top shelf liquor out. But if you're the only one drinking it, you really don't need to separate it from the rest of the collection because nobody's going to abuse it. And that's kind of how I feel about my records. Anyway, I'm just rambling here. Over here, it's just, just some books that I enjoy reading that I didn't put to my library. We have a book collection as well. Maybe one day if there's enough interest, I'll show you my book collection. As you could tell, I am an analog guy across all media. I like physical books. I think things like Kindle serve this purpose just like streaming. When I'm traveling and I want a book to read, I will pick up the Kindle version of that book or the Apple Books version of that book. But a lot of times I already have the physical printed one as well. So I'm just doing it more for the convenience. And then as we get down here, guys, this is where we have the classic country, folk, Americana. This is where we have those records, right? So huge Dolly Parton section. A lot of those came from the VMP series with the Dolly Please or something like series they did, which they gave me this really cool really cool Dolly Parton branded divider, which I really like. I think that's super cool. And then we got, some more down here. Now, what I did for this particular section, since this is against the closet door, and there's a little bit of a gap there because of the way it breaks out from the wall. Plus, I move this a lot because I get access to the closet, so this easily slides out. I used to have it on wheels, but the wheels kept coming off at the bottom of the unit, so I gave up on that. So now I just slide it. It's not heavy enough where it's a problem sliding. But what I did is I actually took these pull noodles. Let me show you. I put these pull noodles back here, so I push the records out. Now, I don't do that for all of them because I like having records recessed in, but the problem with this particular shelf is because of you're hitting the closet door and because you're hitting the trim of the wall and in the wall over here, you get your records are like staggered, you know what I mean? So they don't look smooth across. It just became a really pain in the butt. So this pull noodle trick really helped. While I'm on the floor here, I'll show you this. This is probably not the best storage, guys, but this is where I store the Orb record flattening, and then that is the power adapter for it. So I got to convert Japanese power to American power, and that is the step-up unit that I use to do that. Okay, so over here is the wall of records. Let me back up so you can get a good view of this, so you see what I see. But this is literally, pretty much floor to ceiling outside of lights above the unit. Wall of records. And this is where the majority of the collection lives, as you can imagine. That is end-to-end records, guys. This is holding, there's a little over 4,000 records in my collection overall. And since this is more organized left to right, let me start over here on the left-hand side, see how I can get over here. Room is a little bit tight with a camera, but you got the MoFi box sets. I have more somewhere else. I'll show you that in a moment. But we got some MoFi box sets, and then we got the analog production UHQRs across the board here, plus the two new ones that just came in at the time of this recording. I haven't even had a chance to put them in Discogs or listen to them yet. They're sealed. And then we get into the rock, and I have my Beatles broken out. And what you'll see is, again, you'll see I got the Beatles with the Beatles here, and then the label is up top here because I can't see on the bottom. So this section is the Beatles, and it's also got the 50s and 60s rock and pop. So then we got that here, and it starts out with Elvis, and then we have A to Z, which is basically everybody else. So we break out the artist first for that category where I have a lot of records, and then everything else is alphabetical after that. These sections are smaller. Where this comes in really handy is when we're dealing with big sections like general rock and pop, which you'll see in a moment. And then we get into surf rock, which is really honestly should just be called the Beach Boys. I don't really have anything outside of that. And then we are moving into 90s and 2000s rock. Now, this is not all my 90s and 2000s rock, but to me, these are the staple albums when I think of that genre. There's a lot of stuff that probably can fit in these categories that are under general rock. And then we move into hard rock and heavy metal. And then from there, we're moving into we got our punk rock, grunge, new wave, post-punk records. Trying to go slow enough so you can see some of these spines. A little breakout section for 10s and 7s. And we get into British, pop and alt rock, 90s alt rock, psychedelic rock, and then just a couple categories of that. This is where you're going to find your Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd records and the Doors, Genesis, etc. down there. Okay. So that's those guys. And then it kind of starts again all the way over here to the left, where we get into alternative rock and indie rock, moving towards classic rock. So we got the Stones in there, the Who, Led Zeppelin records. We got post-grunge, moving on to, what would be jam bands, so Dave Matthews, little Dire Straits, and you might not agree with some of these categories, but this is for me, when you have such a big collection, you have to organize your records in a way that you know how to find stuff. Singer-songwriter, this is where you're going to find your Dylans, your Joni records. You're going to move over now to this category here, which is kind of the soft rock, adult rock, which you got, Foreigner and Boss Gags, etc. And then we're going to get into the Southern rock and blues rock, moving over to now general rock, right? So now we actually start general rock. And again, this is where you really see this stuff makes a huge difference of being able to break out, your lettering, your bands where you have your, a majority of your records, right? A big collection of their catalog. And then you start getting into, your other category, right? So these are all my Bs, if you will. And it's not saying that, hey, I got 4 back albums or something like that, or whatever the case might be. I just tend to break them out when I have 5 or more. I feel like that's a good time to break it out. Elvis Costello, etc. I mean, it's some really cool stuff here. And again, you'll see that there's MoFi, etc., all mixed in, right? So a lot of folks like to break those out because they like to see all the same color spines next to each other. That's just not me. I want to dig in. I got to organize the music on a way that I understand it. So hopefully this is a good view into my collection. I get a lot of questions asked how I organize. I get a lot of questions asked what kind of records I have, if I mix records, if I break out certain pressings, etc. I don't. Like I said, there's records in here that can be $1,000 record and it's sitting next to a brand new reissue of a record. As we go through this, what we'll start to see is we break out into pop. We break out into pop. Let me show you here. This bottom row is 80s pop, 90s pop. Then we get into present pop and then general pop. So that kind of takes off the rest. And then we start hip hop, and we start with, Memphis hip hop rap, East Coast rap, West Coast rap. There is a difference in that. We got pretty much actually I have the entire Tupac discography. I got the entire Eminem discography. Got a lot of these complete collections, which really took a lot of time and quite frankly, a lot of money to collect. So I take great pride in my hip hop collection. There's every Eminem record basically. And the Fat Boys, to me, that is the best section, probably the most played. I love the Fat Boys. ICP, I got a lot of their the first set of the Joker cards. This second set I don't really care too much about. So but you can see there's a lot of just weird stuff, right? My musical taste is all over the board. And then we have down here sort of the electronic music. Then we get into electronic crossover. We go into down-tempo, chill, a little bit of soul and groove. I'm trying to get this on camera as best as I can, guys. And then we got logos falling over. Then we get into funk and soul. And then our soundtracks, a classic funk, and then soundtracks take us to the wall. And that one's a little bit hard to get to, but quite frankly, I don't play a lot of soundtracks. So that's pretty much it for the records per se. As far as what I do when I'm listening to them, I've kind of put, this is sort of my up next or something that I want to explore. This is sort of this little thing on the wall. This used to be my now playing, but I got this cool thing. I'll show it to you. I'll go over all this stuff a little bit in a moment, but I got this little thing now. It sits on my thing for now playing. But that used to be my now playing rack. So that's what I got there. And then I think that's it from a record standpoint. If there's anything you want to see, or if you want me to do, my top 5 or 10 rarest records or top records I have from each genre, I think is really cool. I think that's an episode. Just let me know in the comments below. I've been trying to do this thing called Friday Finds, where I go over some of the more rare records in my collection. So hopefully if that's something that interests you, just look up for that series. I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, we're going to switch over to the hardware. I know I have a lot of folks that are interested in the equipment itself, and it's been a while. I mean, when we look at this system now compared to where it was a year ago, a lot has changed. In fact, it even looks like a completely different setup. And I'm super proud of what I built, but I can tell you as somebody who's an audiophile, you're just never done, right? There's always more you want to do, and that's just a fact. All right, let's start out over here. Got a single sub. The room's too small to have a dual sub. One day, when I have a larger space, I'll get a second sub, but this is the JL Fathom. This is the 112 V2 model. It's sitting on stack audio feet. So I have the Ova 50s, and then it's on that Rolex subwoofer platform. And that does two things. It tightens up the bass really well, but it also stops all that bass energy going into the floor so I don't rattle the whole house. The energy stays in the room, which is where I want it. And then that is connected by, I think it's the subwoofer cable by AudioQuest. And then we also have this is the KEF Reference 3 Meta speakers. All right, there's a lot of reference speakers KEF makes. There's a lot of meta speakers they make. This is that all put together. This is their second down from the reference line. So they make a reference 5, which has basically 2 more subs in it. That's kind of what you get. It's just more low end. But with a subwoofer, I felt like I didn't need that because pretty much all the other components in this speaker are the same, except for the extra deep end that they provide. So I figured for my space, which is a 12 by 12 room, these speakers are actually too much. They should be in a much larger space. I get that. People are going to comment on that. I got them spaced out as much as I can. I'll talk a little bit more around getting the room right here in a moment, but yeah, I'm doing the best I can, guys. And they are connected by the AudioQuest Robinhood cables. I know some of you probably think cables don't matter, but I can tell you when you have a resolving system like this one, cables do matter. You can literally hear the difference. If you don't believe me, come over for a listening session. I'll show you the difference. They're sitting on the Ova 70s, which are really great. I really like them. I used to have the 50s underneath here, but when I moved to the 70s, man, I got to tell you, just open things up way more. I think one day I'm going to buy the 100s and put them underneath my speakers, but I don't know if these are going to be my forever speakers. So until I know what speakers I'm committing to, I don't think I'm going to buy the Ova 100s right now because I think the 70s pair well with these KEF speakers. But one day, guys, one day I'll get the 100s in, and then I'll do a 50, 70, and 100 shootout. I think that'll be really, really cool. Okay, let's get a little bit closer now. I'm going to walk through this based on signal chain. We'll start with our analog chain first, and I'll explain it to you how this is set up because it's set up 2 different ways. It might be confusing, so I'll try to go through it slowly, and then I'll talk about the digital chain and just an overview of why I think having a digital chain and analog system is important. So the turntable is let me see if I can get this camera to go down a little bit here, guys. So the turntable is the Riga P10, but it's not a regular Riga P10, as you can probably already see. I've done some changes to it. So these are the Star Dub feet. I am testing those out. I used to have my table sitting on Ova EQs. I'm testing out these, and I got to tell you right now, they're okay. They don't resolve all the vibration problems, etc. I think they're aesthetically gorgeous, and they mount a little bit better. They actually physically mount into the base, which the the turntable was just sitting on. So if you accidentally nudged or something, you risk, sort of slippage. But it is what it is. Right now, this is the way I have it set up. It might not be the way it's set up forever. I'm using the Stein Perfect Interface Matte on here, which actually helps lower the overall height of my platter because I'm using the Lyric Kleos cartridge. Right, that's the cartridge. I don't know if that's focusing. Hopefully it is. But I'm using that as a cartridge, which is a phenomenal cartridge, man. It's got such amazing range, separation, and it tracks better than any other cartridge I ever had on my system. As far as accessories for the turntable go, this is the DS Audio. This is the Ion 001. And the best way I can explain it, I'm going to do a review on this, so I'll get really involved with it. But the best way I can explain to you right now is that when this is turned on and you got the green lights on, it's basically like a real-time zero stack gun. This is taking all that static energy out of your records as it spins on your table. So you put it sort of opposite of where your cartridge is, where your stylus is hitting the record. And even the friction and that's being created by that stylish dragon on the record, you're being able to destatic it using that machine in real time. And it makes a difference. I'm also using a reliable flex light. I love this light. It really helps a lot with reading matrix on pressings and checking the quality of a record, especially new records that I get in. I'm sorry, it's having a little bit of an issue zooming because it's so small. So it's kind of going in and out. And these are my just general accessories, right? So I got the Michel Riga made clamp which has the Michelle R on it. And then I also have the Stack Audio Serene Stabilizer. And I got to tell you, there's an audible difference depending on what weight you put on, but these aren't weights really, but which one you put on the turntable. And then of course, there's a difference when you don't use anything. I try to figure out what works best for the album at hand. Sometimes I feel like I get a little bit better with the Serene. Sometimes maybe if the record has a little bit of wobbly to it, the clamp works a little bit better. It really depends. And then just the general accessories on cleaning, man. I used a groove washer. I'm a huge fan of the groove washer. I use a goat hair brush that's wide at angle that kind of covers the entire side of the record at once. And then sort of my just general prep tools. And then back here, I think every record collector needs a spindle drill, because so many records are being pressed weird. And then this is a magnifying, this is from Wally Tools. It's a magnifying glass that I use to inspect my cartridge. It works extremely well. Okay, that goes into this. This is the Sutherland Dos Locos. That is a dual mono transpedance phono preamp. So that is two separate circuits. And what's cool about this is that you can use this for multiple different things. First off, they have dual inputs because you can use this as a single mono. So if you wanted to have a single Dos Locos, I guess I don't know, I guess it wouldn't be called a Dos Locos anymore. But if you wanted a single Locos, you can definitely do that. And then you can use it as a monophono pre, which I think is really cool. The way I have it set up is for stereo. So that also has additional inputs on each side. It has two outputs because it's used for a mono amp. And I'm going to explain to you why that's important for me in a moment. But I got to tell you, I've had a lot of different phono preamps in this room, and I've tested a lot of phono preamps in this room. This so far to me, for dollar per money, that is the best one I have ever had for my setup. Okay, really big fan of the Sutherland brand. That then goes into the Vitus amp over here, right? So this is the Vitus RI, I think it's the 101 model here. So I use the Vitus Power. It's the integrated amp, so it can do a bunch of cool things. I really just use it as a amplifier though. I'm not really using anything else integrated. I don't have the DAC adapter or anything into that. But that's what's powering the speakers, and that's sort of the one chain for the analog portion of this. Now, where I have an additional chain, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting for folks, is that because the Sutherland has a dual output, I also have a digital chain for the analog source. I'm going to explain to you what that does. So on this separate way out of the Sutherland, I go down to this sugar cube box, which seems to be a little bit tilted right now. Apologies for that. It's not I should have checked the equipment, but this goes into this sugar cube box, which will remove pops and clicks off of pressings that just quite frankly cleaning can't remove. So if you drop a record into an ultrasonic and it still has noise on it, this is actually a real-time noise filter. If you go into Steve Hoffman forums, you will see that people struggle, man, on being able to tell the difference, audible difference when this is turned on and when it's turned off. And I will say, as somebody who's listened firsthand on a high value system like this, so long as you're not using their DAC, because you can disable their DAC on here. I don't like their DAC, but you have a choice to use your own DAC, and that's what I use. I use that setting. And as long as you do that, I completely agree that you don't hear a difference in audible difference. Like you can hit the bypass mode and it will turn that off, and you hit the bypass mode again and turn it on, and you'll notice a difference. You won't notice a difference. Now that feeds into my digital amp, which I'm streaming background music right now. That goes into the TNA DAC 200. That is my DAC of choice today. So that goes into my DAC TNA, and then that TNA goes into the mini DSP here for further room correction. Okay, so this is where I'm going to spend just a second to talk about room correction. You'll notice I have 100 things all over my walls. I spent a lot of time playing with Rue and measuring this room to try to get the sound as best as I can. Now, despite my best efforts, there still was some dips in the room that if I wanted to squeeze the very last bit out, I could only do it with room correction, right? Because this is a living space. This isn't dedicated just for listening to music. I work here. I play my keyboard here. I can't just randomly block the entire room with sound, acoustic treatment stuff. So I go to the mini DSP, which then goes to the Vitus. So I have an option when I'm listening to music. I can keep it 100% analog all the way through, or I can take advantage of some of the new modern technology and use things like room correction and noise removal, etc. And I enjoy going back and forth through both. I think some records, I really love the pure analog sound. I just think you can't beat it. In fact, one day I hope that I'll never need the DSP in my system again. That's the goal. Is to eventually eliminate that from the system and really allow all this equipment to breathe, because even a TNA right now for the digital side goes to the DSP, which means I'm being forced to use PCM instead of using DSD, which is what I really want to do. But yeah, so that's kind of what I got going on there. And then for the digital end, we will go from the Mac server over here, the Mac Studio, which is running Rune. Is also running HQ Player. That goes into the DAC 200, and then that goes to the mini DSP and back down to the Vitus amp, right? So I have that pure digital signal as well, and I use that a lot of times to compare pressings, to preview new music, for background music. But I think investing into a high quality DAC, even though you're an analog person, really allows you to compare pressings against each other. I think having almost like a standard or a control in many ways, and I'm not saying that, obviously digital is mastered different, but being able to have some sort of reference point and be able to go with confidence to say, this album sounds better than high-res digital. If you haven't invested in your digital chain, how do you know? How do you know if it sounds better than digital? If you have a $10,000 analog setup and you only spend $1,000 on your digital, how can you really compare? That's a question I always wonder. All that gets fed into the PowerQuest 707, except for the amp. The amp actually just goes directly into the wall, which has the upgraded energy Edison, outlet there on the wall. I got all of these things. These are Butcher Block acoustics blocks here. They're sitting on these cork isolators. All the equipment have the OVQs on them from Stack Audio. The only difference is the ISO acoustics. I'm using their Gaia platform. This is the 6 Gaia version of that platform. All of the cables are AudioQuest, they're Robin Hoods. I told you I have the subwoofer. The digital side is using their coffee grade. All the interconnects are AudioQuest Water, whether they're the RCA or the digital. So that's what I'm using from a cabling standpoint. And I think for the quality of system I have, that's good. I think that right now, maybe some new cables might be beneficial, but that's what I got going on here. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue to tour here, but I just need to pause this video momentarily. So I'm going to bring you back here in just a second, guys. Okay, we're back because I wanted to share with you kind of what the room typically looks like. Normally those curtains are closed. They're acoustic curtains and blackout curtains. So they work out really well and they help reduce any of the reflections that come from the window. And the other reason I wanted to share that with you is because I like doing this a lot, and which is using that wall as a massive display of records. So I wanted to be able to at least highlight that for you as we continue the tour. But I think being able to showcase all of the beautiful artwork that vinyl allows us to see is a fantastic way to use this space. And if you're curious, these shelves that I've been sharing with you are the IKEA Kallax shelves. I think that they are one of the best shelves that you can possibly get for storing records. They really are truly my favorite anyway. All right, over here in the corner, we have a little bit more artwork. Obviously being vinyl latte, got to have a little artwork with music and coffee. And then we have our Yamaha. This is the electric grand piano. I have played several instruments in my life. I started out at a young age playing saxophone, and then during the college era, I started to play guitar. and now I am on a keyboard / piano trip. And I really love this particular keyboard because it actually is one of the few, this is the Portable Grand, it's one of the few that every single key on the keyboard has been mapped perfectly to the original authentic sound of a grand piano. Whereas a lot of the other keyboards, especially if they're not Yamaha, if they try to mimic that sound, it's all digitized. They only sample a few of the keys and they kind of digitize the rest, or kind of make it up. Okay, we're getting into the studio. Now, if you're a record person, hold on. Got some records still to show you. We're not completely done yet, so enough to hang in there. There's some more cat art there. And then over here, hanging up on the wall, this is my very first acoustic guitar I ever purchased. And it is the Dreadnought Martin & Co. guitar. So I keep it there. One day, if I have the space, I'd have all my guitars and my saxophone on the wall. But that's up there because that was my very first acoustic guitar I've ever purchased and just means something to me because it's what really got me into playing guitar when I was younger. Okay, so from the desk, what we got here, these records that you're seeing here, I got records on the floor right here, as you can see. These are records that I've recently acquired through going record store shopping or have come into the mail, and they are newer records or collectible records. I didn't buy them in a collection, right? These are new to me records, whether they're new or vintage, that I just have to sort through. They have to go through Discogs. I want to sample them. I want to play them. You know, when I'm doing my record reviews or walking through some of the cool things, I tend to use this little wooden stand-up thing that I got here for going through those records with you. It's a nice way to have that right next to me as I sit at my desk. My desk, people ask me sometimes what I use for video editing. I mean, this is it, man. This is behind the scenes. It's nothing super fancy. It's a little bit unprofessional, although some might look at it and be like, man, it's a hell of a setup, but I think I can do better. And hopefully when I get a better space, I can do it. Everything works off of this Mac. So I got the MacBook Pro. I think this is probably only about a year old, and when I bought it, it literally was maxed out on every offering, no matter what it was. I have my Focal Bathy's headset on top of there for headphone listenings. I really like that headset. It's my favorite headset to travel with. Plus, I love that it has a built-in DAC. So what happens is that this is actually a Panasonic GH5S camera that I use. It's on this stand. And I do have a teleprompter screen in front of it because while I'm talking to you on camera, what I tend to do is I write notes, especially when I'm reviewing like 10 albums. I write some notes about the pressing details, the year that it came out, anything significant, like what mastering engineer it is, so I can keep on track. Otherwise, what I notice when I don't have a teleprompter and I'm not having speaker notes come up on the screen there in front of me, I tend to get in weeds and I'll talk 20 minutes about one record, and next thing you know, I got an hour or an hour and a half long video. And if you look at some of my first videos that I released, they're all almost like an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and I'm only talking about like 10 records, right? So it helps keep me paced out and it keeps me on point and it keeps the facts straight. That gets connected, the camera gets connected to this Atmos Ninja recorder, which has an external hard drive, an Angel drive that I record to. So I'm recording to separate media. I don't record directly to the computer. And then these little panels you're seeing are my lights to make sure that I stay illuminated, nice and pretty for you all. And then this is my microphone that I use that I can move and I can position depending if I'm facing directly in the camera. If I'm on a streaming, I'm facing directly into the monitor. I can raise the height. It's an adjustable arm. This is the Sennheiser. This is the MKE 600 microphone. So it's a little shotgun mic that I use for my recording. And as far as tools of the trade are, let me get my coffee out of the way here. We have that goes into the Creative Labs breakout box here. For the sound, so I can control the sound. And then I use Final Cut Pro for all my editing. And this loop deck is an amazing tool if you edit in Final Cut Pro. You can customize all these buttons to make your editing a lot quicker. And I tend to use the hell out of that. So I showed you a lot of stuff. We're almost full circle here. Another cat stuff. We got a couple more books. We do have some other records over here, guys. This is right when you walk in. So we have some box sets here that are not on the major wall. These are just random assortment of box sets. And for whatever reason, I just stuck them over here. Maybe because they're so thick, like this Blacklist from Metallica is a great example. It's just so heavy, and to be able to put in a wall, it just takes up so much space. So I just kind of put it there. But there's some cool stuff here. This is the Allison Krauss Union Station Live Mobile Fidelity pressing, which is a super cool record that a lot of folks want. And the Macklemore and Ryan Lewis as well is also a really collectible item. You'll notice that a lot of my box sets, if you looked at last year, I had tons of box sets. What I've done is I pulled a majority of those records out, sleeved them individually, labeled them, and put them on the wall. And I took the boxes and I put them in a temperature-controlled storage unit, so they just don't take up space. One day, if I have enough space, I want to display all them. But today, I just struggle with a little bit of space, so that's what I've done to compromise. And then, of course, the records that don't really fit too well on the shelf, meaning that it just, there may be inner sleeves in a box or something like that. I've just kind of have, put into the normal record collection or in the shelf here. I'm showing down here, this is the last bit of my records. This is the Vinyl Moon collection. I've been a subscriber of that for quite some time, as you can see. So there are all the additions that I got over time. And that's really it. The little Bob Marley thing was custom made for me by my wife, who is a crafter. She makes a lot of these 3D boxes here for record stores, etc. And she made me this Bob Marley one because I'm a big Bob Marley fan. And she's got a little craft business called Treasure Made. So it's a plug for my wife. Again, guys, that is pretty much it. The only other thing I would say is the actual listening space itself. So this is a zero gravity chair. What I love about this chair is that it is comfortable. It is zero gravity. So when you're sitting in here, you take all that weight and pressure off yourself, and it moves, right? So it gives you a little bit of rock, which also helps accessing these records back here, because this, quite frankly, easily moves out of the way when I put my big fat butt back there to grab some jazz records. The other thing I really like about it is that it's positioned perfectly where the tweeters of the speakers are right at ear level when you're sitting on that chair, which is exactly where you want them. You want your tweeters ear level. You don't want to sit really above them or below them. So that works out well. What I'll say this chair does not do too well with is that this thick cushion here where your head would be, that is a little bit of a wall of sound, where sound can hit this and kind of reflect back. That's the only complaint I would say I would have, but for comfort, I will sacrifice a little bit of sound quality for that. And I'm so close to these records anyway that I don't think it makes too much of a difference. And then here's where I keep my notes. So this is the famous microphone that I use to record the audio for my shorts. People always say the room sounds amazing. I have a dedicated mic that I plug into my phone. Orchids are my favorite flower, so of course I have a little bit of orchid there, just kind of keep my space personalized. I used to have tons of memorabilia in this room, has been all transferred out to make room for records, right? So if you watch my older video, up here was all memorabilia stuff, which is now gone because I use that space for records. And then of course I take my notes and I have a little dB measure here to kind of understand what the sound's doing to the room, how loud something is, etc., guys. But that is the room tour. Maximizing the best I can with the space that I have, this 12 by 12 space. And I really hope you enjoy this one. I think it's fun to go back and look at last year's video and see how much has transformed into the space, into this room. And I can't wait to do this again next year, where I should be in a completely different room altogether. And hopefully we'll see different records, and we'll also have a chance to see some new hardware. So thank you all for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it.